Golden and Zilien were also in extreme danger, their lives hanging by a thread. However, thanks to the appearance of the White Crane and White Fox immortal couple, their story had a happy ending. But what about other places? The cities governed by the Free Alliance. There, the battle was only just beginning. Explosions and smoke billowed, forming dense black clouds over the towering buildings. Emerging from the chaos was a massive, pitch-black creature, its grotesque form accentuated by multiple legs. This crazed godlike beast flaunted its enormous green pincers as if it owned the place, laughing maniacally, "Ha ha ha! You humans, all of you are so insignificant. Everything about you is small and weak." Before it could finish its sentence, a powerful pillar of spiritual energy slammed into it. This sudden surge of strength could only come from the death of other gods. This was the third time it had received such a power boost, though it wasn't sure which of the 12 deities of Azure Star had fallen. Wasn't the pace too fast? It should have been thrilled to receive more power, yet an uneasy feeling crept into its mind. How were the humans managing to kill the gods despite their ever-increasing strength? Could they be gaining the upper hand? A flicker of doubt crossed its mind, but outwardly it maintained its arrogance. Somewhere nearby, a falcon had likely flown ahead to warn others. The Free Alliance's extraordinary warriors suspected that this god had done something to increase its strength. Their eyes widened in shock, but the beast refused to show weakness. It burst into laughter, pretending that the power surge was all part of its plan. Raising its enormous pincers, its mouth began to glow with a blinding red light, preparing to obliterate the humans before it. "This is perfect. I will become the strongest god," it bellowed, "against the gods of Azure Star. Only the elite warriors of Earth or the Misty Mountains could stand a chance. Ordinary humans had no means to resist." Meanwhile, in another location, roaring flames surrounded the so-called nature god. Its name was ironic, given that its abilities seemed more about destruction than nature. The raging inferno of the nature god clashed against Panda's crimson lotus sunfire, creating a mesmerizing contrast between two different flames. The once jovial Panda had stopped laughing. It realized that its opponent was extremely powerful. The crimson lotus sunfire enveloped Panda, forming a protective barrier before surging forward like a torrent of burning lotus blossoms, piercing through the opposing flames. The fiery barrage continued until Panda's fist slammed into the nature god's face, knocking its head to the side. The god's legs buckled, and it let out an anguished scream. Panda prepared to follow up with another attack when, out of nowhere, a swarm of tiny green tadpole-like creatures appeared. Their bulbous heads and thin tails resembled sprouting seeds. The creatures rapidly coiled around Panda, elongating into vine-like tendrils. Before the Panda realized it, they had tightened around its limbs, stretching it in 4 directions. "Oh shit," Panda cursed. Not only did they restrict movement, but they were also draining its spiritual energy. The more energy they absorbed, the thicker the vines grew, even sprouting golden flowers as if mocking their prey. Struggling to break free, Panda found itself face to face with the gaping maw of the nature god, its jagged teeth gleaming ominously. This was a technique the god had never used before. There had been no warning. Panda's mind raced, searching for a way to escape. Frost Fist. Panda roared, its body suddenly erupting with freezing energy. The frigid blast spread rapidly, encasing the vines in ice, causing them to stiffen and crack. Pathetic little vines. Got anything stronger? Panda sneered, hurling a rapid stream of insults. "You call yourself a god, yet you rely on cheap tricks like this? What a joke!" It was probably the only creature in the universe bold enough to call a god a brat, despite being the size of a candy bar compared to them. But the nature god was a cunning one. It would never allow such insults to go unpunished, especially not from some alien beast. "You earthlings. Always so arrogant." It growled, determined to silence the Panda for good. The god suddenly enveloped itself in a swirling storm. This windstorm wasn't an attack, it was a transformation. The nature god's divine form began to emerge. Unlike the grotesque mutations of other deities, its power visibly skyrocketed. Moreover, it had absorbed the strength of at least 3 fallen gods. Its presence became overwhelming. Panda clenched its fists. But instead of fear, excitement flashed in its eyes. "Now this is what I'm talking about." The more dangerous the fight, the more Panda relished it. It had fought opponents 2 ranks higher than itself before. This so-called god was just a beast with some extra fur. The greater the challenge, the greater the thrill. If you're so strong, come at me. Panda roared. Panda's battles were always fiery and explosive. Meanwhile, for those with a colder disposition, the fights unfolded differently. Take Yui, for instance. He was in the central city, the most heavily attacked area. After organizing humanity's resistance against the rampaging beasts, he now stood face to face with an azure star god. Yui observed the god observed him, then, the god scoffed. Your spiritual energy isn't as impressive as I imagined. No one knew what kind of dreams this god had about Yui. But he certainly had unrealistic expectations. Unbothered, Yui simply responded. You'd best hold on to that thought. You will regret it after you die. That simple response seemed to flip a switch in the god's mind. Its body erupted with purple energy, the air around it vibrating with an eerie hum. I will not die, it declared, its divine form beginning to take shape. Purple energy surged behind it, revealing eyes devoid of pupils, yet their gaze locked intensely onto Yui. I control the death of this world. I am the god of death. Its divine form fully materialized. A skeletal reaper clad in a pitch-black cloak. In its left hand, it clutched a weapon eerily similar to the scythes of legendary Grim Reapers. How ridiculous! Yui raised his hand, his fingers crackling with electromagnetic energy. The so-called god of life had already perished at the hands of the Misty Mountains. Now, another one emerged, claiming dominion over death? What a joke! In an instant, dozens of spiritual energy blades materialized around Yui, darkening the sky like a looming storm. Even gods die, he declared. With that, the blades shot forward in unison, colliding into the god of death's body with an earth-shattering explosion. Yui's power had grown exponentially since his last battle on Earth. As the only human recruited under Yuziyu, he had received immense support and training, elevating his strength far beyond his past self. The explosion should have obliterated the god of death's form. However, the god's body reassembled effortlessly, as if it were made of mist. Its scythe radiated a violent purple aura, eager to strike. With a wave of its hand, the energy split into countless skeletal warriors, each wielding a deadly weapon, awaiting their master's command. You do not choose your death. The death I grant you cannot be refused, the god of death intoned. The skeletal army surged forward, weapons raised, ready to rip Yui apart. Doesn't it seem contradictory that the skeletal soldiers are described as pristine white when the god of death should have known that Yui could manipulate magnetic fields? He didn't even bother moving, nor did he show a hint of fear. The moment he raised his hand, the air crackled with electricity. Let me enlighten you, he said. 70% of bone matter is composed of minerals, including iron. As his 5 fingers clenched, the skeletal warriors were instantly crushed into dust, unable to even graze his robes, wiping out the god of death's entire army in a mere second. It was as simple as that. The pale-faced deity hesitated for the first time. Yui quite enjoyed that expression. The god's confidence had crumbled. In an instant. Your life is not yours to decide. He repeated the same words back to the god of death, provoking it into a rage. In retaliation, the deity summoned a monstrous spirit beast. Far stronger than its skeletal minions, it grinned wickedly. Interesting, show me the true strength of your human race. Unlike the brittle skeletons from before, this spirit beast had no bones to manipulate. Surely, Yui couldn't stop it, right? He tensed his muscles, and brilliant purple electricity surged around him. His enhanced magnetic field ability at work. Magnetic field enhancement was a power that used magnetism to strengthen the body, multiplying strength, endurance, and reflexes 5-fold. It took a bit longer to activate than his previous attacks. By the time he looked up, the massive beast's gaping maw was already descending upon him. But in the end, its fate was the same as the skeletons before it. Yui raised a hand. A sharp screeching sound filled the air as an invisible force crushed the beast's giant head from multiple directions. It burst apart, revealing everything inside, while Yui remained unfazed. As the monstrous spirit was obliterated, the god of death let out a pained groan, as though he'd been struck in the gut. It seemed that summoning the beast had cost him a significant amount of energy. Now that it had been destroyed, The backlash was severe. You call yourself the god of death, but did you even graduate middle school? If you hadn't skipped physics class, you know that everything in the universe is made up of atoms, including spiritual energy. I can manipulate magnetic fields to alter the structure of spiritual energy itself. Yui said casually, but of course, the god wouldn't understand. Since words are wasted on you, I'll let you learn through pain. Clearly, the deity didn't grasp what was happening, which only fueled its fury. It gripped its staff tightly and lunged at Yui. What was there to understand? All he had to do was nullify Yui's ability, right? No point in arguing with fools. Yui activated his extreme speed, launching himself forward in a flash for direct combat. The god swung its staff, unleashing a wave of cursed energy like a lashing whip. So, it didn't dare face Yui directly and was relying on ranged attacks instead, the cursed burial technique, an accumulation of vengeful souls' resentment. Whoever it touched would die, the deity smirked, but before it could even relish its advantage, a hand suddenly shot forward, straight through the deadly curse. Grabbing the god's skull, its eyes widened in horror. Yui stared into the deity's hollow sockets. What was that you just said? He tilted his head slightly. Didn't quite catch that. But how could the god repeat itself when Yui's hand was clamped over its mouth? Never mind, no need to say anything. A deafening explosion erupted, filling the space with blinding purple light. When the dust settled, the god of death was lying on the ground, its tattered cloak in shreds. It took a moment to realize what had happened. The once pristine skull mask had shattered, revealing a grotesque, sagging layer of crimson flesh beneath. Cracks spread across its face, and one of its arms hung limply, completely broken. But the worst part? The god had no idea what had just happened. Yui stood there, unscathed. Did he just charge through the curse without a scratch? Never before had the god of death encountered an opponent this perplexing. He dared not make a reckless move. Yui casually lifted something in his hand, the deity's severed limb. He glanced at it, then at its former owner. Finally, he raised the limb and spoke in an almost indifferent tone. So this is your spirit body? Before the god could react, Yui crushed it in his grip. The remnants crumbled like burnt paper, scattering into the wind. And you dared to brag with a spirit body this week? He dusted off his hands. Today, I'm taking your head.